Hey guys, and welcome to today's tutorial on another one of my favorite page styles. Okay, so let's just start with the tutorial for today. And the first step we always need to do for any of those page styles is to cut and score our cardstock as well as our pattern papers. And for the measurements, you can refer to the cutting guides and templates which are available in my Etsy store for different album sizes. And when I cut my cardstock and pattern paper, I always like to label all the elements I have cut. So this is just an example on how to use your cutting guides for cutting and scoring your cardstock and pattern papers, and then after scoring you can go ahead and do the next step. So the next step for this page style is to attach tape right next to the scoring lines. So we have already scored our cardstock and now we can take our 3/8 of an inch tape, so at least that's what I like to use, and you just want to make sure that you place it on this little flap we have created with scoring, and you just place it right next to the scoring lines without actually covering the scoring lines. And then after placing the tape, we want to cut off the corners or the tape hanging from the edges from the cardstock elements. So for cardstock element A, I just use my small scissors to cut off the tape excess, and I don't cut it at an angle here. But then for cardstock element B and C, you can actually cut at a small angle on the back side of your cardstock, and just make sure that you don't accidentally also cut into the scoring lines. You just want to cut right next to the scoring lines. Once you have cut off the corners, you can go ahead and actually fold up the little flaps we created. And for this, turn around your cardstock because you don't want to fold it up on the side where you scored it or where you placed the tape on. So we want to fold it on the back side, and then I also like to get my bone folder and burnish it down. So now we can attach our cardstock elements B and C onto our basic page, and before I want to make sure that I place them in the correct position, so I get my Tim Holtz ruler and a pencil, and then I just find the middle of my basic page and I lay down my cardstock element C first, and then I mark where I want this to be attached, and then I just go ahead and remove the tape backing and just place it down onto my basic page. And I always find it easier to first only remove half of the tape backing, and then I use the non-sticky side to align my cardstock elements, and then I can go ahead and remove the rest of the tape backing to stick it down. Now that our cardstock elements B and C are attached, we can continue by also attaching those cardstock elements A. And for this, again, I remove just half of the tape backing and then I place it right onto the cardstock element B. So it's placed on the basic page and the little flap is placed on the flap of cardstock element B, which we have already attached. So again, I use the non-sticky side to align my cardstock to the edge of the basic page, and then I go ahead and remove the rest of the tape. And when attaching the first cardstock element A, just make sure that you don't accidentally cover the scoring line of cardstock element B, because you still want cardstock element B to fold nicely over the cardstock elements A. Now the second cardstock element A needs to be attached right next to the flap of the first cardstock element A, so you don't want to place it on top of the flap but right next to it. So again, I remove half of the tape backing, I align my cardstock element A with the edge of the basic page, and then once I've found the correct position, I go ahead and remove the rest of the tape backing to attach it. And then you can just continue by repeating this step for the next two cardstock elements A. And because I want this to be folded very nicely, I go ahead and use my bone folder to burnish it down, and I make sure that I burnish it down for each of those cardstock elements A. And now we need to cover our cardstock elements A with the pattern papers A. So for this I like using my wet glue instead of tape, because by using wet glue you're still able to move around the pattern paper until you find the right position so that you have an even border around your pattern paper. And when attaching those pattern papers A, you want to make sure that you don't accidentally cover those little flaps of the cardstock elements, because then you won't be able to still flip those cardstock elements A. So always just attach them right next to those flaps, so to the scoring lines, and make sure that you have an even border on the cardstock as well. And then for those little flaps which are not covered with any pattern papers now, you could actually go ahead and also cut some pattern paper strips to also cover them up. But for me, I usually just leave them blank, but sometimes I actually go ahead and also cover them, and for this I most of the time would use these branding strips which come with most of the 12 by 12 pattern papers. Now we can add our closure to cardstock elements B and C, and you can actually decide if you want to use a magnet here or if you want to use a Velcro circle. So I decided to use a Velcro circle for this page style, so I just added my pattern papers first. So if you want to use a magnet, you would be careful because you can't add your pattern paper yet, but if you're using a Velcro circle, you can go ahead and just add your pattern paper on the inside of cardstock element B and C, and then also on the outside of cardstock element B and C. And for the closing with the Velcro circle, I actually want cardstock element B, on which I want to attach the Velcro circle, to be a little bit sturdier. So I actually cut out those square pieces of cardstock by using a scallop frame die cut. And I just place one of them on the front side of cardstock element B, and then the other square on the back side of cardstock element B, and for this I just use some wet glue and then I attach them just back to back and make sure that I'm burnishing down. So now you can attach your Velcro circles onto those cardstock elements B and C. And I actually just get the first side of the Velcro circle closure and place it on cardstock element C first, and then I make sure that I attach the other side of the Velcro circle so that it's closed onto the first one. So because they're self-adhesive, I now only have to press down my cardstock element B and the Velcro circle will just stick in the correct position. So that's it for today's page style, which is a large waterfall page. So this waterfall page style is actually the same size as the basic page. So you could include 4 different larger photos on here, and then you could also include smaller photos by adding them to the sides which are covered with pattern papers as well. So yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed today's tutorial, and if you did so, I would love to get your feedback in the comment box down below. And of course it would also mean a lot to me if you could give this video a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So I hope that you are having a great day, and I would love to see you in my next video.